Hi guys, it's Mr. Stevens back again with Brothers in Arms, The Lives and Experiences of the Men Who Fought the Civil War in Their Own Words by William C. Davis. And we are going to jump right back in here to where we left off the last time. And that would be up this way a little bit. Right here. And we're going to just jump right back into where we were. I hope you guys are still enjoying it. I know that I am. And here we go. I killed him. The company wanted him killed. I killed the son of a bitch, and I was the only man in the company who had the heart to do it. An Illinois sergeant. Occasionally, the resentment, often mixed with intemperance, became too much to bear. If an officer were fortunate, the revenge taken upon him by aggrieved soldiers came in the form of a cruel joke. Unpopular officers, overly fond of their horses, could wake one morning to find the animal with the shaved mane and clipped tail. Others were locked in the privies or had their tents rifled or booby-trapped to fall down around them in the night. A few officers experienced the most extreme manifestation of soldier resentment. The Illinois sergeant who testified after killing his captain was not alone. Occasionally, men vowed that they had spotted a hated officer, meaning that in the next battle they would kill him if the enemy did not. Men of the 6th New Hampshire tried repeatedly to kill General Thomas Williams in action, but missed him. Confederate General Charles Winder fell to the Yankee shell on the same battlefield where his own men intended to shoot him if they could. The soldier had an array of weapons to try, some experimental, like the Ketchum hand grenades. Such weapons were often as dangerous to the user as they were to the enemy. These are the remnants of a Spencer carbine at top, the Sharps carbine below it, and a Colt 44 Army pistol. The Dunker Church at Antietam, photographed shortly after the battle with some of the dead lying near where they fell. These were the grisliest artifacts of all. When the soldiers got out of line, the punishments could be anything from a rebuke to a firing squad, and often the penalty did not fit the crime, but rather reflected the caprice of the officers in charge. Some were inordinately lenient, treating even capital offenses with what one Confederate had called a little fatherly advice. Others might visit years of imprisonment at hard labor for a minor infraction. The result was that the soldiers did not know what to expect, making the threat of punishment a weakened deterrent. Offenders, when punished, were made to ride a wooden horse for hours a day, carry a ball and chain, parade around camp in ridiculous costumes, or wear signs proclaiming cowardice, thievery, or desertion. Serious crime saw a man hanged by his thumbs, or gagged and tied to a wagon wheel, or even branded on the hand or forehand after shaving his hair. Execution was the final punishment, made worse by bungling firing squads that often left it to an officer to fire a coup de grace. There was a class of officers who felt that every violation of camp rules should be visited with the infliction of bodily pain in some form. John D. Billings, 10th Massachusetts Artillery. For the worst misbehavior, a firing squad could await a soldier like this man, kneeling in prayer against the coffin he will soon inhabit for eternity. A Cook Confederate carbine and the leather cartridge pouch. Relatively few weapons were actually made by Southern manufacturers who had neither machinery nor raw materials to produce in quantity. Instead, the Confederacy had to rely largely on European imports and captured federal weapons. Many an infraction could bring a transgressor an uncomfortable and humiliating ride on the wooden horse, suffering the ridicule of his camp mates. Chapter 5. The Naval Conflict. Enlistment for the Webfoot, Johnny Rebs, and Billy Yanks was little different from that of the infantrymen, but after that their training and daily life differed radically. For one thing, more young teenagers, 16 or less, managed to enlist. For another, they were almost always better dressed and supplied, partially because no long marches wore out clothes. while proximity to rivers and harbors made food more readily accessible. Day to day, the sailor slept in his hammock, rolled it away on rising, then spent the morning swabbing decks, polishing brass, splicing ropes, repairing sails, cleaning the guns, and more. Only then, around 7:30 a.m., did he wash himself and get his breakfast. There followed some leisure hours, perhaps an inspection, and then some light gun drill after lunch and before dinner. After that and another inspection, the rest of the day was his for writing letters, listening to a fiddle or banjo music, going ashore if possible, or any of the myriad other amusements by which warriors of all times passed their idle hours. The life of a sailor is not one of a real or regular work, yet its outlines are the same day after day. Alva Hunter, USS Nahant. While it took the Union a while to get up to speed, eventually it was fighting the war on the water with the most modern steam navy in the world. The navies often saw boys barely into their teens serving as cabin boys and powder monkeys, like this youth aboard the USS New Hampshire. As with the land forces, the navies had their own distinctive insignia, down to the buttons on their trousers and jackets, like these Yankee buttons from the era. With the eating of that first meal aboard ship, I began to feel that at last I was really shipped into the Navy. Alva Hunter, USS Nahant. No one ate like a king in the Civil War, yet in general the men of the navies, North and South, enjoyed a greater variety and abundance of food at mealtimes than did their counterparts in the armies. Time, content, and quality of meals varied widely according to where a sailor was stationed, but he generally ate 3 meals a day, starting with breakfast around 7:30 a.m., a lunch at noon, and an early dinner around 4 p.m. The breakfast started with a pint of strong coffee and a large chunk of preserved beef that the sailors derisively called junk. Lunch was the main meal of the day, much more substantial. It included vegetables, more salt beef or salt pork, anything local like shellfish or game, or even fresh meat, cheese, milk, and butter, and the ubiquitous coffee. Sailors on ocean-going commerce raiders sometimes did even better, thanks to why they captured from prizes taken. Finally, thanks to the early hour of serving, dinner was a small meal, perhaps some bread or hardtack and another piece of salt meat, and, of course, coffee. Union seamen above the famous USS Monitor rest on the deck for midday meal being cooked on the portable stove. Significantly, some of the sailors are black, the Navy's integrating well before the Army's. A Union seaman proudly poses against a powerful deck gun on a steam frigate. At a holdover from earlier naval warfare, cutlasses sit in a rack in the background, though boarding actions were almost non-existent in this war. In the officers' mess aboard the ship, north or south, a higher class of service was evident, including even monogrammed china. These pictures are from ships of the Confederate Navy. Early in the morning, the joyful cry of "Sail ho!" was heard from the masthead. George Townley Fulham, CSS, Alabama. For every hour in actual battle, the average sailor spent weeks or even months in dull routine. The men aboard the river gunboats saw the most action, whether against other vessels or enemy forts. Sailors in the blockading squadrons the Union had stationed off Confederate harbors occasionally chased and took a ship attempting to pass through, but rarely engaged in actual combat, while for Southern sailors in those ports, life was much the same. The men on the commerce raiders like the CSS Alabama and on Yankee cruisers hunting them saw most of the oceans of the world, but again, little actual fighting. Instead, for all of them, sea duty meant watching endless miles of river or oceans pass their bows, while remaining ever vigilant for that speck on the horizon or around the next bend, a hint of sail or plume of smoke that could mean the foe approached. The dashing terror of the seas, Captain Raphael Semmes, stands at right on the deck of his cruiser, the CSS Alabama. He sank more Union tonnage than any other Confederate raider. The USS Rhode Island, one of a number of sidewheel steamers used in the Union's ongoing fleets. The uniform and equipments of the Confederate naval officer included his tunic, sabers, speaking trumpet, field glasses, compass, pistol, clothes bag, and more. These items here include Captain Semmes' telescope, bottom left, and pistol, bottom right. Fires were crowded, steam increased, boats were pulling about from ship to ship, signals were flying from every mast, 15 or 20 boats large and small rushed up the river and formed in line of battle behind the Monitor. William F. Keeler, USS Monitor. No sailor, north or south, saw as much constant action and danger as the men working the fleets on the Mississippi River and its tributaries, and to a lesser degree the gunboats on Virginia's James River and some of the streams of North Carolina. Huge behemoth ironclads plied the Mississippi, massive floating barns mounting a dozen guns, powerful steam engines and carrying 100 or more men. Even on the hottest days of summer, they labored in the internal inferno, keeping boilers going even as shipboard temperatures rose above 120 degrees and more. The only respite from the heat was to sleep on deck at night. But on the other hand, they got to go ashore frequently to supplement their food rations with fresh goods, and off either bow, the landscape continually changed, providing some relief from monotony. And working in close conjunction with the armies, they were to witness much of the land war, occasionally even taking their guns ashore as in the siege of Vicksburg to participate in the action. Union sailors aboard one of the Commodore-class gunboats take a rest during their endless routine of patrolling the rivers and sounds of Virginia and North Carolina. One of the infernal machines that came into its own during the war was the underwater mine, called a torpedo at the time. A little more than a tin can filled with gunpowder, it was crude but effective. Few ships could withstand a well-placed blast under the waterline. One of the behemoth Yankee ironclads that patrolled the Mississippi and its lower tributaries in the later stages of the war. These monsters were powerfully armed, heavily armored, and almost impervious to Confederate attack. Whether his active duty was the monotony of the open sea or the danger of the riverine service, every sailor looked forward to stepping back onto land on a shore pass, and when he did, all too often he came to make sure he was going to have a little fun. No wonder, then, that as with the men in the armies, sailors, when given the opportunity, found liquor to be a favored release, and that inevitably led to mayhem. Aboard ship, a seaman got a grog ration that only whetted his appetite. All insubordination, all misery, every deviltry, complained a naval official, can be traced to rum. Even aboard ship, men who hoarded their rations sometimes got drunk. Ashore, intoxication amongst seamen became an epidemic. In 1862, abolishment of the grog ration did not help, but only led to mutiny instead, and its eventual reinstatement. On ship or shore, the boys would be boys. He was decidedly rough in manner, and I had visions of trouble, but 2 or 3 of the others had come up by this time, and one of them said, "Oh, let him alone, Bill. He's only a kid. If he don't want a drink, don't you make him take a drink. And there's a nip more for you and me, see?" Alva Hunter, USS Nahant. Articles of clothing and equipment for Union Navy officers included frock coats, saber, field glass, sextant, leggings for wet weather, and for a surgeon, the white coat, medical kit, and canvas sea bag. One of the Union's workhorses, City-class gunboats that plied the Mississippi. They mounted a dozen guns or more and bore the brunt of water fighting for the Union for 3 years on the western waters. And we will end there for today. I hope you guys are still enjoying the book, and we will come back to it as soon as possible in the next video. Hope you guys have a good day, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye, guys.